This episode of The Witch Wave is brought to you by Ritual and Shelter. Looking for a magical place to shop and hold space? Check out Ritual and Shelter in Homewood, Alabama. Browse through their bookshelves covering topics of magical history, theory, and practice, as well as tarot cards and oracle decks from well-known artists, and even decks created by local witches in Alabama. From teas, tonics, and tinctures to toad skulls and tourmaline towers, you can find all of these and so much more on their witchy website, ritualshelter.com, or in person. So lather up that flying ointment and travel down to Ritual and Shelter in Homewood, Alabama, or check them out online at ritualshelter.com. Did you run out of flying ointment? Well, they have that too. This episode of The Witch Wave is brought to you by Mixed Color. Hand stitching is an act of magic, adorning and transforming cloth while infusing the fibers with protective and fortuitous energy. If you want to explore embroidery not just as a skill, but as a portal into the imaginal realms of your own mind, then the workshops from Mixed Color Textile Studio are just what you need to enhance your craft. Mixed Color is run by my friend and prior Witch Wave guest, Christy Johnson, and I know you're going to love these classes. Explore one of their free stitch series to get started. From enchanted blooms to mythic creatures, you're sure to find something to spark your creative spirit. Head to mixedcolor.net for more. That's M as in magic, IXED color.net. This episode of The Witch Wave is brought to you by Wheel of Fate. Wheel of Fate in Edinburgh, Scotland is a cozy little witch shop where you can learn to make your own besom broom, bind a spell book, or spin wool into yarn. There you can find local art inspired by heritage crafts, the natural world, and regional myths and folklore. I love Scottish magic and mythology, and at Wheel of Fate, they believe that there is magic in the creative arts, and they want to share that magic with you. So go ahead and visit wheeloffate.co.uk to book a workshop or learn more. This episode of The Witch Wave is brought to you by The Witch Summit. The Witch Summit is taking place on October 4th in Phoenix, Arizona, and it was created to curate immersive experiences that foster community, nurture magical education, share transformative witchcraft from all cultures, amplify activist voices, and elevate small businesses. The Witch Summit will feature speakers, authors, hands-on workshops, a marketplace, and a bewitching ball, and the speakers include such witchy luminaries as Maria Minnis, Mavis Lynn, Iyami Ajay, Marcella Kroll, and yours truly. Yes, I am so honored to be the keynote speaker at the Witch Summit this year. Tickets are on sale now at www.thewitchsummit.com/tickets. And if you use promo code WITCHWAVE, all one word, you get 10% off Witch Summit admission. I'll see you there.
The world is filled with bewitching people, and you might be one too. Welcome to the podcast where art is magic is real, and reality is stranger than dreams. I'm Pam Grossman, and this is The Witch Wave.
Hello and welcome to The Witch Wave. Happy summer, everybody. Happy Pride. I hope you had a splendid solstice celebration and a restful Juneteenth. And welcome to our Season 8 finale before we go on summer break. And my gods, do I have a special one for you today, because I've got artist, activist, and author Tourmaline here to talk all about the magic of Marsha P. Johnson. Yes, it is such a sensational one, if I do say so myself. But before we dive into all that, let me just say that I hope you are hanging in there. I know so much of the news has been devastating, and I hope you're applying your unique magic, your unique skills, your unique resources toward not only fighting all of the atrocities that are happening right now, but also towards creating new actions, new art, new ideas, which can help replace all of that destruction with deep care and beauty and kindness and mutual flourishing. And that is so much of what Tourmaline and I discussed today. And my intention is that this episode is a balm for you, because it certainly has been for me. So yes, it's our season finale, but fear not, I will still be doing bonus episodes and minisodes throughout the summer via the Witch Wave Patreon, as well as leading monthly virtual rituals. So do join me over at patreon.com/witchwave if you haven't already. And then season 9 of the Witch Wave will begin in September. And as I say every year, look, I know that the rhythm of this podcast is different than a lot of other shows. And I don't fucking care, because my rest and replenishment is so necessary, and yours is too. And that's why I've been taking a podcast pause every summer since the show began way back in 2017. And I do this so I can not only focus on other projects, but also so I can catch my breath and recharge my batteries so that I can keep making this show in a joyful, sustainable way for as long as I am meant to. Now, a few updates from me. First of all, some of you know that I gave a talk last week at MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art here in the city, and this was part of their Salon on Witches. Now, I was very honored to be one of the presenters and to take part in the panel afterwards, and I'm very grateful to those of you who attended live or watched the live stream. But if you missed it, don't worry, it is on YouTube, so do check that out. I also want to remind you that tomorrow, the day after this episode drops, so that's on Thursday, June 26th, Jonica Stuckey and I will be teaching an online workshop all about the magic of Pan, the goat-legged Greek deity of the untamed wild. It is going to be such a delight, and I'm having so much fun researching this one, so do join us if you feel called to. There's a ticket link at pamgrossman.com/events or at the link in my Phantasmaphile Instagram bio. And yes, it will be recorded if you can't make it live, but you still got to register to access that, so please do so. What else? Oh yes, I will be in LA, yes, on July 26th for the glorious Garden of Tomorrow Festival happening at the wonderful Philosophical Research Society. This is one of my favorite places in the world, and I can't wait to get to go back. This festival is brought to you by House of Hackney and the Library of Esoterica, and it will be a day of panels and presentations and workshops to help conjure an ecologically and magically vibrant future. Tickets are available now, again, at pamgrossman.com/events or the link in my Phantasmaphile Instagram bio. And if you use code MAGIC15, that's magic with a K, 15, you get 15% off ticket price. So that's MAGICK15. Please join us if you are in LA or its environs. It's going to be a really, really spectacular day. And finally, hey, did you know I have a book coming out? Yes, indeed. Magic Maker, The Enchanted Path to Creativity comes out on October 14th, and it is available for pre-order now. The cover reveal is coming so soon, and your pre-ordering is so helpful. So thank you in advance to those who choose to do so or have done so already. Okay, so yes, it is Pride Month here in the US, no matter what our authoritarian government says, and whether or not you are part of the queer community, it feels more important than ever to show up to your local Pride events, Pride parades. Show up, show out, show your solidarity for this community. Now, I'm not going to go through the litany of anti-trans legislation and homophobic book bans and hateful anti-queer rhetoric and all the other bigoted acts that we're witnessing right now against this community here in the country. But it is clear that it's being targeted in big ways and small ways across the board. And this shit has been torn from the fascist playbook. Make no mistake, going after vulnerable populations and using them as scapegoats is a clear way of trying to divide and distract us so that we can all be more easily manipulated and controlled by a tiny group of rich, greedy, corrupt cowards who only want money and power that benefits themselves and only themselves. The queer community has so much overlap with the modern witchcraft community because witches are marginal figures. Witches are outsiders who upend the status quo and whose magic is limitless and diverse and democratic and runs counter to a lot of the patriarchal white supremacist power structures which seek to maintain an oppressive grip on the world. But celebrating one's queerness, one's otherness, whether that's along lines of gender or sexuality or other alternative modes of being, is a way in which we not only survive, but thrive. There's a reason why when someone first declares they're a witch, we say that they came out of the broom closet. Because living openly with an identity that is still deemed threatening or sinful by conservative, small-minded folks is an act of resistance and risk and reclamation. Of saying, hey, this state of being that some people are scared of is actually a means for me to be my fullest, most potent, most healthy, most authentic, most expansive self. So whether a person is a witch, a trans person, a gay person, or any other of the letters in the LGBTQIA+ alphabet, there is a kinship between us because we are all members of wrongly maligned magical communities, which are in actuality nuclei of love, creativity, pleasure, and radically compassionate collective power. Remember, the heart of revolution is spirituality, because a truly spiritual life is one that honors the interconnection between all beings. And today, on this episode, the radiant being, Tourmaline, joins me to talk about all of this and more in celebration of her new book, Marsha, The Joy and Defiance of Marsha P. Johnson. And if you're not super familiar with the visionary trans activist ancestor Marsha Pay It No Mind Johnson, don't you worry, because we discuss many of her magical facets. Yes, as the legend goes, it's said that Marsha threw a shot glass, which helped spark the Stonewall Uprising in June of 1969, and that alone is worth honoring. But there is so much more to this flower crown wearing, altar making, care conjuring mother of liberation manifestation, and I can't wait for you to hear all about it. But before we get to that, first let's check and see what's come through on the Witch Wire.
Who is it?
Witches!
Hi, Pam, longtime lover of the Witch Wave pod. Thank you so much for all that you do. My question is about being a new mom. It's not that I'm going to be a new mother, but one of my best friends is about to give birth, and I don't know anything about it. She's my first friend to have a baby, and we're going to be having a little party for her before she gives birth. I want to gift her something, but I don't want it to just be diapers or pacifiers. I think it'd be really nice to give her something personal, something maybe related to a goddess. So do you know anything about any sort of patron goddess of new moms or new babies or any kind of really symbolic thing I could give her? Something a little unique. She's not somebody who's like materialistic in any kind of way, and I think she'd really appreciate something that felt really kind of personal and even magical. So any thoughts I'd really appreciate, and thanks.
Hi there. Thank you so much, and thank you for this beautiful question. And let me just say that even though you are not a mom, and I'm not one either, there are still so many ways to mother, to give that nurturing magic to someone who needs it. I was thinking about how Marsha P. Johnson was a mother to so many in her community, and also how even this intention of yours to take care of your pregnant friend is a very maternal and protective and loving act. So just putting that out there. But anyhow, yes, I love the idea of you giving your friend a gift for her, because you know that baby is going to get lots of presents, and rightly so. But I always love giving the pregnant people in my life a gift for them, and not just a gift for the baby. Because pregnant folks need lots of support and care themselves. So I love that is where your heart is at too. And I think that a really lovely gift would be a talisman, like a piece of jewelry or a small sculpture or a piece of art that has a goddess or being of midwifery or motherhood on it, to give your friend that extra spiritual support and to remind her that what she's doing, creating and caring for new life, is divine. And now before I dive in, I just want to say also that if you're not sure how a deity will resonate, something with an image of the Empress Tarot card is a beautiful gift for a mom-to-be or for anyone embarking on a new creative project. It's the card associated with fecundity and cultivation and flourishing, and it's so beautiful, so that's another thought too. But let's talk goddesses. And so first, I'm thinking of deities who are associated with motherhood or midwifery. And there are definitely the obvious ones that come to mind, such as the Greek goddess Demeter, whose name literally translates to the mother, and who is arguably the protagonist of the Persephone myth. Demeter literally goes into the underworld to rescue her daughter, and she's also the goddess of agriculture and the harvest, which has very fertile implications too. There's also the Egyptian goddess Hathor, who is a motherhood deity. And then there's Isis, the goddess of magic, who is also mother of the god Horus, as you may recall. And actually, there are theories that those famous paintings of Mary holding the baby Jesus or breastfeeding the baby Jesus are actually just updated versions of much older images of Isis holding or breastfeeding baby Horus. I also love the Mayan goddess Ixchel. That's Ixchel, who is a goddess of fertility, midwifery, and magic as well. So anyhow, a talisman or image depicting any of those could be very meaningful and help your friend feel blessed, protected, and connected. But then I was also thinking of deities who are not mothers themselves, but who still are associated with childbirth and midwifery. When Artemis, my matron goddess, was born, the myth says that she immediately turned right around and helped her mother Leto give birth to Apollo, Artemis's own twin. Can you imagine? So yes, Artemis was born to help with childbirth. And so she has been associated with midwifery for ages, even though she remained a virgin goddess herself. So she's a beautiful representative of this kind of energy, and maybe even a stand-in for you, since you're not a mother, but you also want to be there to protect and guide and love on your friend. Hecate, the Greek goddess of witchcraft, also has associations with childbirth, and so she's a good one to call on for some extra witchy midwifery if that resonates too. Now, as to where you can find such a talisman, honestly, my go-to is usually Etsy. I happen to love these little pocket deities made of porcelain by a maker called Magic Deary Studio. That's MAGICKDEERY Studio. And I don't know them personally. They are not a sponsor. I'm just a big fan, and I order from them a lot for myself and also for lots of gifts. But there are so many other magical makers on Etsy, so that's a good place to start looking if you can't find something at your local witch shop. Or even better, you can make something yourself. Whatever you decide, I'm sending lots of love to you and your friend and her glittering little one. Now, on to my guest. Tourmaline is an award-winning artist, filmmaker, writer, and activist whose work is dedicated to Black trans joy and freedom. She's the author of the new book, Marsha, The Joy and Defiance of Marsha P. Johnson, which is the first comprehensive and utterly beautiful biography of the visionary trans activist. Tourmaline is a Time 100 Most Influential Person in the World awardee and a Guggenheim Fellow. She has frequently appeared on ABC News, as well as in the New York Times and Vogue, and her art is in the permanent collection of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Tate, and the Getty Museum. She created the critically acclaimed film Happy Birthday, Marsha, and she has directed pride campaigns for Dove, Marc Jacobs, and Reebok. She previously worked with Queers for Economic Justice and the Sylvia Rivera Law Project, and she lives in Miami, Florida, but she was able to join me in person in the podcast studio here in Brooklyn, and what a joy it was to have her. You can watch the video of our conversation over on my YouTube channel, which is at Phantasmophile. Tourmaline. Hi, welcome to the Witch Wave.
Oh, thank you for having me on the Witch Wave. I'm so honored to be here talking about Marsha, talking about witchiness, talking about glamour.
All the things.
All of it.
I am beyond honored that you're here. And I have been a fan of your work for years. I love your films, your photography. So you've been on my radar for a while. But when I heard about Show the People, the new book, Tourmaline's book, Marsha, The Joy and Defiance of Marsha P. Johnson, I was like, this is the moment where I was hoping to talk to you because
Yeah.
I was so excited to really hopefully connect the dots between Marsha P. Johnson and her activism,
Right.
as well as her deep magic.
Yeah. She was a deeply spiritual person, and all of her art and her organizing and her activism, her care work was really underpinned by her sense of spirituality, her relationship with God, and magic.
Ugh, love.
Yeah.
So I'm sure a lot of listeners have heard the name Marsha P. Johnson.
Totally.
It's certainly a name that's been invoked more and more frequently, thanks
Yeah.
in large part to your activism, your historicism, if that's the right
There we
word, your research, and of course, many others that are your colleagues in this space. But for those who don't know much about her,
Yeah.
how do you like to share her story?
Partly, I wrote the book because Marsha's a full person. Usually around Pride, we hear the name Marsha P. Johnson. We associate her with the Stonewall uprisings in June of 1969, where for days, lesbians, gays, bisexuals, trans, gender nonconforming people, LGBTQIA plus people fought back against the police and the harassment, the ongoing policing of our communities. And Marsha was a leader in that uprising, and iconically known as someone who was adorned with flowers and would walk around the West Village, changing looks and inspiring a kind of beauty in the landscape that had not been seen before. But Marsha also was a full person, right? So after Stonewall, after those uprisings, she started an organization called STAR, Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries.
Best
It was
name.
celestial, right? Best
Yes.
name ever. And she did it with her friend Sylvia Rivera, amongst others. And they organized for things like housing and healthcare alongside access to childcare, right? It was this expansive dream of what freedom meant to them and to us, is a powerful legacy that we're inheriting.
Yes. And I learned from you that she was deeply involved in AIDS activism
Exactly.
in the sort of like midpoint to end of her life as well.
That's right. So in the early emergent HIV/AIDS crisis, Marsha was a care worker. And so she was someone who was showing up and showing out for her community. She was doing it abundantly. She was a performer, performing in hospitals and AIDS hospices and AIDS wards, you know. She was doing it on the street for fundraisers for people's health care. She was doing care work in the home, right? She was changing sheets. She was taking friends to the hospital. And then also a thing that I discuss in the book, she was doing it through spirituality.
Yes.
She was doing prayer work. She was doing seances. She was lighting candles. She was in relationship to God and the spirits. And so that was a huge part of the way that she performed her care.
Yes. So I learned so much about her and about her community at large.
Yeah.
And it feels like her life, as all of our lives are, is a life of complexity. Like
complexity.
she's this like multifaceted jewel of a person.
That's right.
Who was an activist, a performer. She performed with the Angels of Light and the Hot Peaches.
Yes, okay.
And also, she was like a living work of art.
Yeah,
the way
she
you
was.
write about her in the book is the way in which she transmuted, I mean, I don't know if you'd call it trash or discarded objects and elevated them to this art of costume and glamour.
She was able to calibrate to the beauty and the glamour in everything. And so it's when we're in a landscape and the everyday starts to lose its luster, she was able to calibrate to be keenly aware of the magic and the glamour of everything. And through things like adornment and performance, she brought to life, or she showed the life that already existed in that everyday to an audience that then got to say, oh, I'm part of this every day. I must therefore be beautiful too.
Yes.
And so that was a part of her magic.
Yes. You write so beautifully in the book about Marsha coming to understand her own identity and her own identity as a transgender woman.
Yeah.
This is language that wouldn't have been used back then, but we use that phrase now.
Yep.
And yet she very deeply identified with the feminine. You write about how she also really made space for herself unapologetically and freely.
Yeah.
And I was so moved by some anecdotes you write about about her not just staying downtown,
Right.
but eventually like going to Lord and Taylor
That's
and
right.
going to the
Bringing
makeup
the
counter.
girlies.
Yes.
Exactly.
And you write at one point about makeup, I think your language is as an incantation.
Yeah.
So makeup as a spell.
Exactly.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, there are these moments after Stonewall where Marsha was beginning to self-actualize, and you can feel the euphoria in her voice, right?
Yes.
You can really hear it. There's a beautiful WBAI interview where she's talking about being on estrogen, right? She's undergoing hormone replacement therapy. She's accessing, however she can, gender-affirming care. And she's talking about the effects on her breasts. And she's so happy. She's like, I've got a handful now. It's not a big handful, but I got a handful.
Yes.
And you can just hear it opening up something for her. And that's what healthcare does for so many of us. I think that's, in today's landscape, people don't understand that trans people accessing to healthcare is like a necessary, hugely important, urgent issue, right? When we have access to the healthcare that we need, our suicidality goes down, our mental health goes up, and we're able to be the fullness of who we are. So while Marsha didn't identify using the term transgender person, certainly we can understand her within the umbrella of a trans person.
Yes.
In 1971, she was identifying as a pre-op transsexual woman. And so their language continues to evolve, but Marsha knew firmly who she was, and she was able to actualize so many parts of herself through community, through care, and really profound sense of joy.
And you write about her abundance,
Yeah.
her birthday partiness,
Yes.
which is the best adjective ever.
Literally. Yeah.
Like she just had this exuberance and this love
That's right.
that seemed to have like emanate through everything she touched,
Yeah.
right?
And that's a really important part of the book that I like to foreground. It's not to say that she didn't go through hard things.
Yes.
The conditions now are quite harsh. We can't open a screen, hear from a loved one, turn on the news, scroll without learning yet another really hard thing that's happened to our community. It was not dissimilar for Marsha. In 1963, Marsha moved as an 18-year-old from New Jersey to Times Square. During that time, you would be arrested and put in jail if you were going outside living your authentic truth as a trans person.
Yes.
There were laws on the books that actually stayed on the books until 2020 in New York State. And so Marsha was navigating a similar landscape filled with precarity, filled with violence. But what she did so often that I find so powerful about her is that she used that as a launching pad to dream beyond what is, to imagine a world that had more.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Just like more of her, more beauty, more care. And so in the 60s in Times Square, she rented these hourly hotels, right? She used to call them hot spring hotels. There's these really beautiful interviews with this journalist, Stephen Watson, who's still alive, was a huge supporter of the book, did a beautiful profile of Marsha in 1979, 10 years after the Stonewall Uprising. And then Stephen Watson went up to Tarrytown to interview Sylvia Rivera. They both were talking about the hot spring hotels. Basically, these were hourly hotels in Times Square that Marsha or the girlies would rent when they got a little bit of money. And in it, they would speculate, they would dream, they would manifest.
Yes.
They would imagine a world filled with more ease. They would ask each other the same question over and over and over again. What would it be like to go outside and feel our beauty? What would it be like to not be harassed every day? How do we arrive at such a point? And so that was 1963. And then they got to the Stonewall in 1969. And then they started organizing soon after. So what you can see is the planting and then the growing, the cultivation of a landscape, right? The planting of the seed and not needing it to be a fully formed, manifested thing right then.
Yes.
Which, I think all of us, understand that sometimes our big dreams take time. And Marsha wasn't slowing them down by imagining they couldn't happen. Marsha was clocking how they were happening.
That's right.
Yeah.
You mentioned briefly Star.
Yeah.
And I love the name.
Same,
Obviously,
right?
it has so many different
So many.
interpretations.
Yeah.
There's the literal stars in the sky. There's movie stars. And then there's the celestial magical realm.
That's right.
That had to have been intentional,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
Do you have a sense of why they so loved that word, she and Sylvia Rivera? And we should probably talk a little more about Sylvia and who she was too.
Sylvia Rivera was 13 years old when she met Marsha in 1963. Sylvia left home at 11 because of deep misunderstandings and unsafety at home. She was kind of back and forth between Times Square and her home. And so Marsha stepped into her life, and Sylvia in an interview said, Marsha plugged in the light for me, right? It's just so powerful to think about Marsha as mother, plugging in the light for her community. And so Marsha would mentor and mother Sylvia just like she would mentor and mother other young street queens, trans folks in that moment for years to come as well. And then in 1969, Sylvia also participated in the Stonewall Uprising and then really became an organizer in what then was called the Gay Liberation Movement. And they were taking notes from groups like the Black Panther Party or the Young Lords. They knew that their liberation was inextricably linked to the liberation of so many others. So they were showing up and showing out at so many different rallies for other people in solidarity, right?
I was so moved by that it wasn't just, let me show up to our parades. They were showing up and showing out for so many different people who are or would have been considered in marginalized communities or who still are considered that.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so then they started a house. So they called it Star House. And in it, Sylvia was actually the person to help. Marsha grew up in the church at Mount Teman Church in Elizabeth, New Jersey. I've been blessed to know Marsha's nephew, Al, for like 15 years now, and Marsha's sister, Jeannie Michaels, and brother, Bob Michaels. And about a week before the book came out, me and my friend Hope Dector went over there, and we were just sitting around a table like this, kind of talking about how much Marsha's legacy has blossomed and grown, right? And how it started in the Mount Teman Church, a deep conversation with God. And then it blossomed and it moved to New York and it went to LA. But anyway, in Star House, Sylvia taught Marsha with a level of precision about lighting candles and praying to the saints, Saint Lucy, Saint Barbara, so many saints, right? In order for safety and protection when they were outside hustling, to be moving in the world and understood with a sense of authenticity, right? That they knew who they were and they prayed for other people to see themselves as their authentic self. And so I think that's really powerful. And then Marsha took it and ran, right? Marsha developed a really profound spiritual practice. She was doing seances for loved ones who were trying to kick heroin in that moment. She was doing prayer work for loved ones as they were transitioning out of their embodied life into the immaterial during the HIV/AIDS crisis. And so Sylvia is such an important person in terms of helping Marsha plug in the light of her spirituality, just like Marsha plugged in the light for Sylvia.
So beautifully said. So I think about how Marsha, she was raised in the church. And I know a lot of queer folks, I should say some, turn away from Christianity for the obvious reasons of oppression and so on. But I have a lot of queer friends who feel welcome in their churches or at least have been able to extract what they needed from their Christian upbringing and discard the things that they no longer need or that no longer served them. And it feels like Marsha is in that category where she continued a relationship with God, with Jesus. But then she had this like expansive perspective where she started praying to these other saints. I love her relationship with Neptune, the Roman god of the sea.
That's right.
And she would make altars, it sounds like as often as she could, wherever she lived or whatever spaces she was occupying. Can you talk a little bit more about Neptune and the altars? You know the witches are going to love that.
So Marsha, in Star House, she had 2 altars that the girlies were cultivating, one at the front of the house and one in the back of the house. And they were lighting their candles daily, making prayers, beseeching the saints for safety, for glamour, for their magic, for money, because of course they needed it. And so they were in a real particular proximity to the saints, to the spirits. And then in high school, that had started with Marsha. Marsha had a conversation with God when Marsha went home one day saying, I'm not going to be able to graduate high school. And her mother was livid. And then Marsha said, years later, well, I made an agreement with God. I said, if you help me finish high school and graduate from high school, I'll go out into the gay community and figure out what it's all about, which is just a powerful thing to think about, how the agreement was to learn more about queerness and do that for God. That's work I'm doing on behalf of God. Which really flips, kind of more dominant narratives of that's work that God wouldn't want you to do.
That's right.
Marsha firmly understood that was God's work that she was doing.
I mean, so I was raised Jewish, and now I consider myself a pagan Jew, which is like kind of an oxymoron, but it's mine.
I love it.
And so one of my understandings, though, of Christianity and of the root of all major religions is that, like, God is love.
That's
like,
right.
It really is, like, that's it. That's
simple.
the whole fucking thing,
that's
right?
That's the whole thing, yeah.
And so it feels like Marsha then, she's actually embodying like the truer, higher frequency of spirituality and religion, which is supposed to be about care, compassion, the fact that it doesn't actually matter what the material world is because ultimately we're just spirits riding around in bodies, whatever those bodies are. And so we should take care of each other no matter what our lived experiences are, what we look like, all of those things. And so I think of her as like doing the true spirit work, like true high magic, the real shit.
The only one.
Right. That's exactly
it's like everything else is a spin-off of that. Everything else is like a pinched off version of that frequency that she was tuned to. Like, she was very much fully calibrated to that real frequency. And she would know it. She would feel good. She would feel alive. She would have a level of clarity when she was tapped into what God's love meant to her.
Yes. On that note, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. This episode of The Witch Wave is brought to you by Logos, the oil candle brand where ancient myth meets modern ritual. Logos isn't just a candle, it's a sacred tool. Refillable, sustainable, and rich with symbolic resonance, each flame is a whisper from the gods designed to illuminate your altar, your space, and your soul. Crafted with clean-burning eco-fuel oil and poured into vessels inspired by Greek archetypes, every Logos candle becomes a personal invocation. Choose from scents like Aphrodite, all roses and warm skin, or Hades, deep, smoky, and mysterious. They sent me an Artemis oil candle, of course, and I think it is so beautiful and so wildly divine, and it now has a prominent place in my home. And because magic is meant to be lived, not just lit, Logos candles are made to be refilled again and again so your rituals can evolve just like you do. Summon your flame, write your myth. Visit logoscandles.com and enter code WITCH for 25% off your first order and free shipping. That's logoscandles.com, spelled LOGOS. candles.com, and use code WITCH for 25% off your first order and free shipping. Logos, we make magic. The Witch Wave is sponsored by BetterHelp. Listen, I know there's still a lot of stigma surrounding men's mental health, but there is such strength that comes from maintaining a healthy mind. And I sincerely think the world would be a better place if more men would go to therapy. Men today face immense pressure to perform, to provide, and keep it all together. So it's no wonder that 6 million men in the U.S. suffer from depression every year, and it's often undiagnosed. But real strength comes from opening up about what you're carrying and doing something about it so you can be at your best for yourself and for everyone in your life. So if you're a man who seems to be feeling the weight of the world, talk to someone, a friend, a loved one, a therapist. Now, I love my current therapist, and lots of the dudes I love, from my husband to my dad, go to therapy too. And I've seen firsthand how therapy has helped them feel less anxiety and more ease around meeting their goals and just feeling good in general. Therapy is so helpful for learning positive coping skills and how to set boundaries. It empowers you to be the best version of yourself. And it isn't just for those who have experienced major trauma. It can just help with day-to-day stresses and pressures. So if you're a dude or you love a dude who could use a bit of extra support, check out BetterHelp. It has an App Store rating of 4.9 out of 5 based on over 1.7 million client reviews. And it's convenient too. You can join a session with a therapist at the click of a button, helping you fit therapy into your busy life. Plus, you can switch therapists at any time. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of experience. Talk it out with BetterHelp. And our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/witchwave. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/witchwave. Hi, Witch Wavers. I know, and you know, you want some Witch Wave merch. And our print-on-demand merch site is now available through Dashery. So if you want to get different variations of our gorgeous Witch Wave logo designed by Thunderwing, or our Witches Are the Future catchphrase designed by Lara Antal, printed on everything from t-shirts, mugs, totes, stickers, magnets, notebooks, you name it, you can. Shirts come in different styles and fabrics and are available in sizes small through 5XL, so you can order whatever you'll feel you're most comfortable and most magical in. So head on over to witchwave.dashery.com. That's witchwave.dashery.com, or you can click the Dashery link in the Witchwave shop over at witchwavepodcast.com/shop. Welcome back to the Witchwave. So I was asking about Neptune because I'm a dork and I love mythology.
That's right.
And my pantheon, in addition to what I call capital S spirit, I have a whole host of deities. A lot of them are Greco-Roman that I have like a deep kinship with. So when I read about Neptune, I was like, ooh.
Yep.
And you write about how Marsha seemed to have this conception of what she called crossing the River Jordan. I realize that's I believe, a Christian bit of, I don't know if it's liturgy or mythology, but this idea that when you're crossing like a body of water into the spiritual realm.
Yeah.
And so my takeaway from the book is that Neptune was a god that she somehow sort of connected with to help people cross over that river. Is that
That's
right?
Exactly right?
Am I?
Yes.
Okay.
No, you're 100% right.
Great.
And also, Marsha had a profoundly expansive understanding of life. She knew that it didn't start when we got into our physical bodies, and it didn't end when we left them. Life was ongoing. And so to cross the River Jordan was to just support someone crossing into another aspect of their life. And so she was doing that work with care and intention. Not everyone understood it. But she held that truth.
I was so moved by how you wrote about certain offerings she would make to the Hudson River, to Neptune, to help people cross over, or at different, points in her life that she was asking for extra support and protection. And speaking of flowers, I wore my flowers for Marsha today. And I like our blue vibe as well. We did not consult each other on this. But flowers were such a metaphor for her, and they were also something she embodied. You write about how when someone she cared about died, she would have this sort of, invocation or intention where she would say, I'm going to mangle it. Forgive me. I do have it somewhere on these papers, but something to the effect of like, I hope they will become a flower inside me.
Yeah, a flower that lives forever is a flower that lives in me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about her relationship to flowers in whatever direction that takes your imagination?
So, I think part of it too is we started a conversation about her joy.
Yes.
Right? And I started to talk about in foreground how she was offering joy even with an awareness of the harshness of her landscape. So it wasn't like she was putting a happy face sticker to cover the harshness.
Right.
She was fully aware and she was allowing that harshness. She was not in denial. She was aware of what was going on, but she was using that as fuel to dream beyond.
Yes.
And so part of the way that she traveled the path to that dream, to the full materialization, manifestation, realization of that dream was adornment, was glamour. Glamour helped speed herself along to being the realizer of the thing that she wanted. And flowers were a huge part of that, right? And so part of the flowers and the adornment and the glitter, she said in an interview in 1991, I'm wearing glitter for all my loved ones who have died of AIDS, right?
Yes.
This kind of constant shimmer, which reflected the constant presence of all of the people that she knew.
Yes.
Because they weren't gone at all. They were with her, surrounding her at every moment of her embodied life. Flowers and the glitter also came from the angels of light. They really helped Marsha plug in the light for adornment. And Marsha took it and ran. So you can see photos of Marsha kind of pre her performances with angels of light and then post her performances with angels of light. And they really were like a tuning fork, like a calibrating force in her life for glamour as we now know Marsha in this way.
Yes.
Yeah.
So for those who aren't familiar with the Angels of Light and Hot Peaches, I'd love for you to talk about them and also just to give them like some extra shine in terms of like, this wasn't just like fringe performances. Like there are performances that David Bowie was attending, Andy Warhol.
Stevie Wonder.
Like
exactly. I mean, they were like John Lennon, Yoko Ono. I mean, everyone kind of in this downtown milieu that was creating art and creating art that felt fresh and alive were going to Angels of Light's performances, right? And so they were a off-Broadway theatrical troupe. They kind of split off from the Cockettes in the Bay, right?
There's a great documentary about the Cockettes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And also, like, my friend Matt Wolf just made a documentary about Pee Wee Herman, who, have you watched it?
I did, and I'm obsessed.
Yeah, because he was going to join the Angels of Light. He left Florida to drive to California with a desire to join Angels of Light and then stopped in Los Angeles. He was trying to make his way up to San Francisco and then got sidetracked by love in the Bay. I'm just in like Marsha and Pee Wee Herman following the same frequency. It makes sense, right?
It makes such sense because these are, magicians by my definition of the word.
That's exactly right. They were magicians.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
They're people who are using performance to change the invisible into the visible.
That's
to shift frequency.
Turning a thought into a thing.
That's exactly it, which is magic. Hello. Magic. Oh, I loved that documentary so much. I could talk about Pee Wee all day. And also that leads to Elvira.
Yes,
and then we'll just go off on a whole tangent. But bringing us back. So the Angels of Light and Hot Peaches. These were like really radical, glamorous, shimmering, funny, beautiful performers.
Yeah.
And Marsha started performing with them.
Yeah. So Marsha just wandered onto stage. Anyone could be in an Angels of Light show, right? Which is remarkable. And also it makes sense why they were so powerful because often, now we understand like gatekeeping isn't actually going to make your thing better. When it's accessible, when the party is accessible, you have more party. Yes. Larry Mitchell and the Faggots and the Friends. Have you read the Faggots and the Friends Between Revolutions?
No.
It's a beautiful text. So it was written by this person, Larry Mitchell, illustrated by Ned Astra, who was in Hot Peaches with Marsha. And it is kind of like litanies or liturgies and essays and stories about being queer and alive between revolutions. And, there's a line which is, the more you share, the less you need, right? The abundance is expansive. And if you're not pinching yourself off from it, it continues to grow and grow and grow.
Yes.
Even if you are pinching yourself off to it, it will grow. You just won't be in a place to like realize it, right?
Yes.
Turn that thought into a thing. So Hot Peaches was a group that was so powerful in part because anyone could join, right? If you went to rehearsal, you could be in Angels of Light, right? Also Hot Peaches, which we'll get to in a second.
Yeah.
But Marsha couldn't be like bothered by the rule of going to rehearsal. She just walked on stage one day to great effect, and then she kind of never left. And then Hot Peaches came shortly after. My dear friend, Jimmy Kamicha, who was a huge supporter of the book and I've known for well over a decade, was in my film Happy Birthday, Marsha, was Marsha's director for The Hot
Which
Peaches.
is such a beautiful film. I just watched it this
Thank
morning.
you.
Gorgeous.
Gorgeous, which I made with Sasha Wurtzel, who Sasha is a magician as well and a witch as well. Just finished a really powerful documentary called River of Glass about the Florida Everglades, which is where Sasha is from. So shout out Sasha. But we made this film, Happy Birthday, Marsha, and Jimmy was in it. Jimmy was able to really help, kind of like how Sylvia helped plug in the spiritual light for Marsha. Angels of Light helped plugged in the adornment glitter light and Marsha's real desire for an audience. Jimmy helped develop it into a real craft. Right? So Marsha was doing 2 performances a day. She was performing with the Hot Peaches from the 70s up until 1992. She traveled with them to London's West End to do a performance at Drill Hall and also to perform in AIDS hospitals and AIDS wards. And so Jimmy was really central in helping Marsha develop the craft of performance. And I think part of why I wanted to write the book is because you, like so many people, we all have different aspects of our life, right? And so it is understandable that someone might think, oh, like Marsha Stonewall, and then, oh, and that lady with the flowers. And I hear she's performing, but what? And then, but actually, all of these parts got as deep as they could. Right? The performance part got as deep as they could, and they were all underpinned by a strong sense of spirit and connection with love.
So beautifully said, Tourmaline. So just like we have chosen family in our material lives, I believe we also have chosen ancestors.
That's right.
And these, in my thinking of this, or my understanding, yes, we choose them, but they choose us. And it is so clear that Marsha has chosen you and you have chosen her. And the work that you do as an artist, an activist, a writer, a historian, all of it, it really is spiritual stewardship. You are keeping her spirit alive, helping to spread and amplify her magic. That's a holy calling. And I'd love to hear a little bit about how you first heard the call.
I've been blessed to be in kind of my own constellation. We talk about Marsha and like the constellation that she was in with Star and many others. There were people who were kind of tending to the light, keeping the flame alive, that hearth alive, well before I entered the picture. So people like Randy Wicker, who lived with Marsha, or my dear friend Augusta Machado, who was also so generous with their time, or Jimmy Kamicha, Anoni. There was a writer, John Kearns, who started trying to do a biography of Marsha in like 2000 and didn't finish, but was just really generous with, here's what I found, like, let me know, you know, what you would like. And so it's kind of like passing the baton, or an abundance of batons being received, simultaneously being passed. And I remember first hearing Marsha, you know, literally 20 years ago. I was hanging out in Christopher Street Piers. I was then in this group called Fierce, which was showing up and showing out for the freedom of young, queer, transgender, nonconforming people of color to like exist in the West Village at the time in like 2005 through the community board and the New York Police Department were trying to pass curfews. And so we were like going to community board meetings and protesting and having marches and saying like, just like those NYU students, we deserve to be able to like show up and be in here, just like anyone, right? Just like the homeowners, anyone. And so that's really where I first heard the call of Marsha. And then, you know, I was an organizer with Queers for Economic Justice and around welfare and housing and healthcare. And, you know, I was like, well, who came before? Because it's hard to remember sometimes like how much we've grown and learned in the past maybe 20 years. But the way that we understand transness and gender nonconforming people and non-binary and our history and lineage is really different now than like 20 years ago. And so I, you know, back then was like, well, who came before? Who can I learn from? Because I was really, I'm a Cancer, you know, it's like, really? What's
sweet
your...
baby. I'm an Aquarius. I have a Cancer moon, though.
I love
Gemini rising.
Yes, Gemini rising. I have a... Okay, anyway.
No, please finish that sentence, Tourmaline.
I'm a Libra rising, Sag moon. So, anyway.
I see it all. Yes.
So...
I'm surprised it took us that long to get into that.
To astrology,
okay,
literally.
yes. But you're talking about, so how Marsha called to you.
I was like, who are the people in the past? So I was really wanting to know, like, we were in this moment of historical erasure. Right? Where we were being kept from knowing what happened before. There was so much loss because of the HIV/AIDS epidemic, because of the housing crisis, because of the prison industrial complex that kept us physically from our lineage. And I wanted to get in there deep and, as an organizer, learn from the past. And then I pivoted to hearing the call of art and knowing that I wanted to feel a kind of deeper, full expression of my life through film and moving image and photography and learning all about that aspect of Marsha. And that kind of culminated to where I'm now, which is that tuning my tuner to the frequency of Marsha, of source, of spirit, of God, of the ancestors, and knowing that, like, that's where I have my greatest resources. That's how I can transmute a problem into a solution. And so thankful for all the people who tended to the flame of Marsha, who came before me and continue to do so. And now I feel like we're really in a beautiful, more lush era.
Yes. Lush. One of my favorite words.
Yes.
So let's talk about your relationship to magic.
I love.
To the identity of witch.
Yes.
Is that a word that feels good to you? Great. And were you raised with a sense of religion or spirituality? Like,
so
how did you evolve spiritually?
I was raised in a few different churches. At first, I was raised in kind of community church with a sense of like Black liberation. And also, this was the early 80s. And so my dad was an outreach worker there. And my mom and my dad were both part of the church. And then my parents split up and we went to a Catholic church, St. Cecilia, patron saint of music. And so that was like really a beautiful place, because that's where I learned theater. There was community theater that was attached to the church, and it was my first time on stage and being like, I love this. I love, showing up and turning up the volume.
You're Marsha's child.
Oh,
like, in so many ways.
Totally,
like, I mean, the parallels are really incredible, but keep going.
So then, when I was young, I was like really also having conversations with God. I was just kind of like deep in study, Sag South Node. So I was just like kind of doing this like wisdom searching thing as like, a 6-year-old? I don't know. It was really kind of, I was like, what was going on there?
I mean, this is who you are.
This is who I am. I got a little older and I was like, none of this makes sense. Also, all these contradictions are just like way too much. I like left the church. And then when I moved to New York, I moved in when I was 19, 23 years ago, something like that. My first like job here was working for religious life at the university that I went to for the chaplain. And so it was like all religious life that was under that banner. So that was profoundly affecting. And
was this still mostly like a Christian framework?
No.
Okay.
So there was the university chaplain oversaw all religious life.
Oh, wow.
So, which was really interesting.
Yeah.
And so it was really not Christian.
Yeah.
Which was really interesting.
So you were exposed to these other forms of devotion, connection.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so that was really powerful. And then I started a really kind of like close friendship with Dory Midnight.
I love Dory. She's been on the show.
Oh, I love that.
I just adore her work.
So we started being friends in like 2007 because we were both part of a convening around prison abolition in the Bay. And then right after, maybe like, so we were both part of like Critical Resistance, Transforming Justice, these abolitionist organizations, and Dory was in the Bay, and then we've been really close.
And I should just interject and say, Dory, for those who haven't listened to her episode, she's a Jewitch.
Yes,
I mean, her Jewish mysticism and her activism and her witchcraft and her queer identity, like, she expresses it all so holistically and
really
so
does.
beautifully. She's such a hero of mine.
Yeah. So we've been friends for nearly 20 years, and she's been like a mentor and a teacher in terms of my spiritual life, and like on a very deep, consistent, like weekly level for nearly 2 decades now.
Wow.
And so,
Oh, I love that. On that note, we're going to take another quick break, and we'll be right back. This season of The Witch Wave is brought to you by Black Phoenix Alchemy Lab. For 20 years, indie scent artist Black Phoenix Alchemy Lab, known affectionately as BPAL, has been formulating perfume oils for each month's full moon, inspired by their colorful names and descriptions in historical almanacs. 2025 will be no exception. Look for their monthly launches called A Little Lunacy, which include not only these limited edition scents for fellow lunatics, but also an ongoing series of perfumes inspired by classical artworks, and some which raise funds for a variety of charitable causes. The lab's general catalog is teeming with perfume oils, hair gloss sprays, beard oils, and bath oils, which can be yours year-round, covering a truly bewildering range of scent types and inspirations that include cinema, Gothic literature, and occultism. To that end, BPAL recently brought back a recurring scent series called An Evening with the Spirits, drawing from legends and historical accounts of Victorian-era spiritualism. These haunting scents, such as Psychodynamic Discharge and the Fox Sisters, will remain in Black Phoenix Alchemy Lab's web shop well into 2025. Month by month, year by year, the lunacy continues at blackphoenixalchemylab.com. All right, who's the holdout? Somebody out there is missing out by not reading the Pagan Pages e-mag. They're missing out on a non-profit pagan e-magazine that features the very best pagan content. We're talking columns, articles, and reviews, all free, naturally, and they're missing out on contributor Wayland Smith's regular column, Wayland's Way, which details Way's pagan outlook and his take on all things witchy. Pagan Pages is must-reading for any well-informed pagan, and you can check it out by going to paganpages.org. Stop missing out on the magic and head over to paganpages.org today. Hello, my friend. I am often asked about how people can get even more witch wave and more magic in their lives overall, and I have the answer. You can join me over on the Witch Wave Patreon. This is how you can hear from me and my other magical guests on a weekly basis via my Witch Wave Plus bi-weekly bonus episodes. And you get the regular Witch Wave episodes ad-free, and you get detailed show notes for all of it. And all Patreon members also get access to my monthly ritual workshops, which you can attend live or watch the recording of at your leisure throughout the month. Rewards for some tiers also include magical merch and contests where you can win witchly prizes, as well as early heads up about my workshops before they sell out, and opportunities to work with me one-on-one. And all backers get access to our exclusive digital coven, where you can connect to a community of other wonderful Witch Wave witches around the world. So head on over to patreon.com/witchwave and sign up. It's a magnificent way to get more magic in your life and to support the show. Thank you so much. Welcome back to the Witch Wave. And so one of the reasons I knew you were on the path is I heard you on Las Culturistas, one of my very favorite podcasts.
Yes.
And you were dropping words there like manifest and portals and ancestors. And I was like, Tourmaline needs to come on my show. Like I was very clear. And I had an inkling of it, but that was the first time that I heard you speak extensively with some of that terminology. So now, like, a lot of people use the word manifest, and a lot of them are talking about, you know, law of attraction stuff and trying to manifest like the job they want, the car they want, whatever, material stuff. Fine. It can be problematic, but there's some good from that too. But when you're talking about manifesting, I feel like you're talking about it in this expansive, magical, world-changing way, which Marsha was clearly doing, even if she didn't use the word manifest back then. Can you talk about how you've come to understand your manifestation powers?
Yeah. I mean, I honestly don't in public talk use the word manifesting too often.
Okay.
Because I think it comes with a lot of like, people, when they hear that word, kind of bring everything to that conversation based off of what certain kind of like, you know, it's like when you use the word God.
Yes.
Right? People are like, kind of automatically assume that you are talking about the same entity that they might have been raised with or have disagreement with, or, you know what I'm saying? So I talk about God specifically because that's how Marsha named her relationship. And at times I do too. But really what I think about is how Marsha was calibrated to a frequency, right? And an awareness that she was more than just her physical body. She extended way beyond it. She was an immaterial being, and a part of her came into her body, and part of her continued to exist on a frequency and an immaterial level, right? That is what some people might call God. She was an extension of God, an extension of spirit. And she had a great capacity to tune to that awareness. And that's where her clarity was. And how she did that varied over her life. So sometimes she did that in the hot spring hotel rooms, those hourly hotels that were like boiling, whether it was spring, summer, winter, or fall, and you couldn't open the window. She was there speculating and dreaming.
Yes, you
right?
call it freedom dreaming.
She was freedom dreaming. So I had a professor in college, Robin D.G. Kelly, who, I was like writing my thesis about Marsha. This was 2005. And he wrote a book about freedom dreaming and really coined that term. So Marsha was, in that sense, freedom dreaming. She was, then allowing herself to be the dream realizer by not getting in the way of her big freedom dreams, right? And by actually, rather than putting her focus, which is so life-giving, which is like really how I've understood kind of put and cultivate and allow for our power, she was putting her focus not on how it wasn't working out, but on how it was coming about.
Right.
And so part of that, right, is being in alignment with all of who she was.
Yes.
So when you put your focus in alignment with all of who she was, Marsha understanding herself as an extension of God or spirit or source, and putting her focus in the direction of how God, spirit, or source might be focusing on the same thing, which isn't in a lackful way, but in a this is coming about way.
Right. It's not a scarcity mindset.
It's not a scarcity. It's a this is coming about way.
Yes.
Marsha,
flourishing.
It's flourishing, right? Like when you plant a sunflower and you're not expecting the seed to turn into a sunflower overnight.
Right.
You have a level of awareness that these dreams, these seeds that we're planting, take some time to become a full material manifested thing.
Yes.
And so it's energy at the end of the day, right? And so Marsha was moving with the energy, which is, you can tell when someone is doing that because there's a level of joy.
Yes.
There's a level of aliveness, right? There's a level of levity and deep connection. You know, you're going in with the sense of, well, the conditions might be harsh, but I'm going to open my heart and be confident.
Yes.
And know my deservingness. And so to me, those were some lessons that I learned from Marsha and other people like Dory Midnight and other teachers, from Abraham Hicks to the School of Life. They do these like monthly manifesting manuals, which are so fun. And, I've just been filling out those and doing my little work. And
love.
How about you? How do you arrive on terms like manifesting? And
it's funny because I also have some not great associations with the word. There's a little friction around the word manifest, especially because there's a lot of, I'll just say like white lady, privileged, new age stuff that to me feels like so the opposite of magic as I understand it. I get really turned off by people who only want to use their spirituality to benefit themselves. I'm like, you're missing the fucking point. Like if your magic isn't expanding you and making you connect to other people and want to manifest like a better world where everyone is free and flourishing, like you're wasting my fucking time. And you're also, I really do think like missing the point. So the word manifest was one I used to be less comfortable with. But now I think more and more people understand that it can mean different things coming from different people's mouths. So it's a word I've come to become a little bit more affectionate with.
You go. Yeah,
I truly believe that our imaginations are such gifts.
That's right.
And if we put our intention into the world, but then take real material actions to help help it grow, there's nothing we can't do.
That's right.
And that's why I love this book so much. It really emphasizes the power that we all have. And it does it with so much joy. I mean, we should mention Marsha was fucking hilarious.
Really funny. And that's how you can tell if you're allowing all of who you are.
Yes.
You have great timing, great comedy.
Yes.
Like you're able to inspire an audience.
Yep.
And also inspire a desire in other people to let them dream a dream that will come about.
Yes.
Yeah.
If I can ask you about the power of names.
Yes.
your name, Tourmaline.
Yeah.
In the witchcraft community,
Yeah.
there's associations with that stone as being
That's
like
right.
really protective and magical.
Yeah.
Is that how you came to that name, if you don't mind
Yeah, of
speaking
course.
to
In
it?
part. So I was working in Louisiana on this film, Mudbound, that was directed by...
Of course.
Yeah, okay. So I was the director, Dee Reese, brilliant filmmaker. I was Dee's assistant, and we were working on these like really haunted plantations, and my family comes out of enslaved labor and plantation work. And so I like just started carrying, I was doing like weekly calls with Dory, and I started carrying around just like a slab of tourmaline.
Was it black tourmaline?
Yeah, huge black tourmaline. It was in my purse every day, and we were on set. So these were long days, right? On this kind of haunted landscape. And then what's also powerful is like tourmaline comes in such an abundance of colors. It's protection plus, right? It's like protection plus watermelon. It's protection plus pink. It's protection plus green. It's all of it. It's not without the black tourmaline. It's the black plus. And so to me, that felt really joyous, and it's simultaneously a source of protection and also a movement in the world, knowing that we can calibrate to great timing. And so what we're doing is we're rendezvousing with the people who are going to bring the best out of us.
Yes.
And I think to me, that's something that tourmaline does.
Oh, so wonderful. So I want to get a sense of how Marsha's magic and your magic can maybe speak to those of us in this moment in time when, as you started talking about, every time we open our phones, there's a horror, a tragedy, a terror.
Yeah.
And there's just such a litany of them.
Definitely.
I'll just say, this episode's going to come out in a couple weeks. Right now, we're dealing with, as we record, the ice in all over the country, but particularly in California and a lot of the protests that are happening.
Yeah.
And I imagine 2 weeks from now when
There's
the episode comes out, there's going to be a lot more stories that come out. And, people are talking, I think, a little bit more about how joy and beauty and spirituality is necessary to sustain us in our activism.
Right.
And yet, I think it's hard for people to sometimes embody that fully because they're just like fucking tired and depressed and scared.
Absolutely.
Like there's so much fear. And when we're in fear, we contract.
Of course.
So what messages or message do you think Marsha has for us in this moment in time now?
So, I think that if we think about that 1963 moment, that hot spring moment of finding relief from the harshness, right? It's like being outside today, we're in Brooklyn and it's very hot. And you want to seek out that shade.
Yes.
You don't always have to be under the sun. Even if you enjoy basking, you love the moment when you're in a room with air conditioning so you can have a meaningful conversation that you couldn't have maybe outside in 90-degree heat.
Yeah.
So looking for that space of relief is really important. In that space of relief, that's when I think you start to move with the magic, move with the Marsha magic.
Wow.
Right?
Move with the magic. I love that so much.
And so you can, and I also love to say, like, there's not a hierarchy of emotions, right? Like, joy isn't a 10 gold stars and fear is -5 gold stars, right? That's not how it works. It's a range of emotions that, for me, indicates, like, just on a personal level, how I'm doing, how I'm calibrated. All of it's really important. All of it's great information. So Marsha knew in a moment of harshness, let's go get some relief. Let's rent with our few little dollars a space where we can just take a nap.
Yeah.
Find some relief. And then also a great thing when you're feeling a lot of fear is to reach for anger, right? When you're feeling really powerless over a situation, a great thing to do is, you don't have to linger there all day long or for the rest of your life, but it can be really beautiful to reach for righteous anger when you're in a situation where you're keenly aware of your sense of powerlessness. That's what Stonewall was about. Marsha and her sisters and her friends and her siblings and her brothers, they were all navigating a landscape filled with powerlessness, with institutions that were moving ideologies designed to make people feel powerless.
Yes.
And what they did was they reached for relief.
Yeah.
They reached for relief in the hotel. They reached for relief by fighting back. It's so important to remind each other that, like, you're not at the bottom of the scale if you're afraid, but it feels delicious and lush to reach for relief.
Yes.
And so maybe you reach for relief by taking a nap or going to a protest or calibrating to an awareness like, oh, like I'm not alone in this. I'm fighting back. I'm joy and defiance. That's the title of the book, Marsha, the
Yes.
Joy and Defiance. And then maybe in that defiant mode, and at least for me, what I understood was I have my greatest resource in my clarity. And when I'm really afraid, I don't have clarity.
Yeah.
And so my goal right now, when I'm really afraid, is to chill out, take a bath, go to a protest, show up for another person so I can get back to my clarity, which is another word of saying joy. In Marsha's joy, in Marsha's clarity, in Marsha's sense of all of who she was, she could transmute a problem into a solution.
Yeah.
And I think that, to me, is the goal. It's not to say that feeling fear is bad. It's to say there's a beautiful upward spiral to our power, and each step along the way is incredibly important.
Oh, I love that. So I recently have been working with the goddess Iris.
Yeah.
She's the goddess of rainbows in the Greek pantheon. And it might have been a couple years ago now, I put together a workshop called Prismatic Magic, and it was all about the magic of the rainbow.
Yeah.
And in my research, I learned that the original pride flag had 8 colors, not 6, and that Gilbert Baker designed it to each stripe had a different thing that he was trying to manifest.
That's right.
And 2 of the stripes, the hot pink stripe was for sex.
Yes.
And the turquoise stripe was for magic.
That's right.
But those 2 stripes got taken away.
That's right.
Tourmaline.
Yeah.
What the fuck? And I'm like, how can we bring the sex and the magic
That's right.
back into
Yeah.
our activism and our radical actions and into queer spaces and so on?
Well, I think, one, you're doing it, and you're doing it
Thank
in
you.
abundance of ways. And so oftentimes when I'm faced with a situation that I'm like, this is so clearly off, it launches a desire in me for what is so clearly on.
Yes.
Which I think is what we're talking about right now.
Right.
That is so clearly off. How do we do what is so clearly on? And you've been doing that work for a very long time. I think about Dory and Adrienne Maree Brown and Marsha, you know, like the Pantheon, the constellation, Neptune. There are people who, you know, who have been doing this, whether in an embodied sense or an immaterial sense, for quite some time. And so you're bringing the lushness back.
Oh, I mean, Tourmaline, thank you.
You really
That's
are.
so lovely.
Yeah.
Well, you are a garden unto yourself. Talk about lush. Come on. We just have a few more minutes, and I want to make sure that we just center ourselves and just like tap into any final thoughts you want to make sure you share, whether it's from Marsha, from yourself, some combination thereof. What is something you want to make sure that people carry forward? Obviously, they should pick up the book.
Yeah.
Marsha, the Joy and Defiance of Marsha P. Johnson by Tourmaline. It is so beautiful. It was such a joy to read.
Thank you so much.
The amount of scholarship. I mean, you've been working on this for, 5 years of writing, but 20 years, right? Of research. So obviously pick up the book, but what else do you feel called to share in our final moments together?
You know, Marsha had this relationship with the spirit named Oxygen.
I'm so glad you're bringing this up because it's in my notes, but I have been so riveted by you. I haven't been able to look at them. Yes, please tell us about Oxygen.
She met Oxygen, Oxy, as Marsha named her, when her husband was killed by the NYPD on Houston. And Oxy kind of like forcefully entered Marsha's life and was a guiding force for decades after that moment, and asked Marsha to really turn up the volume, bring out the fullness of who she was, especially during Pride. And so I think about the rainbow that you have right now, and I think about the month that we're in right now as a deep invitation to remember who we really are, that full, alive version that expands beyond just being in our physical bodies, you know, like that deep connection that you were saying that is so necessary. And now is a perfect time to be doing that. So I think that's a message that Marsha has always been offering.
Yes. Yeah. Tourmaline, I cannot thank you enough for being here. I can't thank you enough for sharing your magic, your art. I wish we had more time to talk about your films and your photographs.
Episode 2.
I mean, and like P.S., for those in New York City, there are many places you can see Tourmaline's work. I mean, go to the Afrofuturist room at the Metropolitan Museum, which is, I mean, talk about a fucking altar. It is so beautiful. And I think is it 2 of your photographs
Yeah,
are there now? But
yeah.
there's so many other ways that people can engage with your artwork,
Definitely.
your activism. And if people want to learn more about you
Yeah.
or support more of your efforts, what's
Yeah.
the best way that they can connect with you?
So I think they can get the book from a library. Also, there's an audio version of it, right?
Yes,
on
yes.
different platforms. So you can listen to it. I'm realizing like I can't read right now, like, but I can listen. So that's
Yes.
totally an okay way to do it. And also, there's different museums, and my film Happy Birthday Marsha that I made with Sasha Wartzel, you can find online.
Yep, I watched it on Vimeo. You can rent it, you can buy it.
That's
It's
right.
a beautiful short film.
Yeah.
Yes.
So all of that.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for
Thank
being
you
here.
for
I'm so
having
honored.
me. Thank you.
That's it for the show. Thank you again to Tourmaline for sharing her transformational and eternally lush magic with me. And that's it for Season 8 of The Witch Wave. I am witching you a magical summer, and I look forward to seeing you here again in September.
Do you have questions, feedback, need some witchly advice, or just want to share something magical that happened to you recently? Drop us an email or voice message over at witchwavepodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you, and you just might make it on the Witch Wire. The Witch Wave is a Phantasmophile production written and produced by me, Pam Grossman. This episode was recorded, edited, and mixed by Josh Wilcox and/or Walter Nordquist and myself. Our theme music is the song Hand and I by Lycanthia. Our new Witch Wave logo was designed by Thunderwing. Special thanks go to Matt Freeman, Laura Antal, and Cece Pascal. You can check out information about this and other episodes on our website, and now buy Witch Wave merch at witchwavepodcast.com. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at witchwavepod, and you can check out my witch emoji for iPhone by going to witchemoji.com or downloading it in the App Store. My books Waking the Witch from Gallery Books and Witchcraft from Taschen are available everywhere now. And if you want more Witch Wave or you would just like to support the show, please join us over on Patreon. That's patreon.com/witchwave. Thank you so much for listening. Witches are the future. I'll catch you next time on The Witch Wave.